You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a woman inquiring about a job vacancy. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hi there. Welcome to the Job Centre. How can I help?
Good morning. I'm here to inquire as to whether you have any jobs available at the moment.
Yes, we have several available. What kind of job is it that you're looking for?
Well, I'll take any part-time jobs I can get. I'm really strapped for cash at the moment.
OK. Bear with me while I have a browse on our system. Here we are. We have 3 vacancies at the moment, all involving quite different roles.
That sounds promising. What are they?
The first one is for a post as a receptionist. It says here that experience in reception or general administration is preferred, but not essential. Have you worked on a reception desk previously?
No, I haven't. I had a baby quite young, and so I have very little work experience. Could you tell me a few more details?
Yes, of course. The job will be to mainly provide quality customer service, both over the phone and in person. When customers are waiting, you will be expected to provide them with refreshments and ensure they have a first-rate experience.
I think I could manage that, and I'm a very friendly person.
That's great.
Do you have any information about the hours involved?
It says here that you will be expected to work several early mornings, 4 days a week.
Any other requirements?
Yeah, you'll have to go through a couple of weeks of unpaid training before qualifying for the post.
I don't know if I would be able to fully commit to that. Did you say it's 4 days per week?
Yeah, it says here 4 days a week, with another day off per week when requested in advance. It also explicitly states that at least one of your working days must fall on a weekend.
I'll have to think about that and talk to my babysitter.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Are there any other roles beginning later in the day?
Yes, there's an advertisement here for a driver. It says you'll need a clean and valid UK driver's licence, with absolutely no exception.
No problems there. I passed my test first time and have never received any points.
It also explicitly states that you must be over 25 and have been driving for at least 6 years.
That sounds quite exciting. Is there any more information?
Yep, it says here that working hours are flexible and the employers are happy to work within your personal schedule since they employ multiple drivers.
That's great.
The employers ask for a commitment to either mornings 5 days per week, evenings 5 days per week, or 3 full working days per week.
I'm sure I can handle all that without a problem.
As well as driving the employers to and from work, they will ask you to perform various duties on their behalf. such as collecting the grocery shopping and picking their children up from school.
Do they need me to work a day on the weekend as well?
No, it says here that they only require you to work on weekdays, not weekends.
That sounds interesting.
OK, there's only one more left, another customer service related post. It looks like it requires you to work short hours, quite late at night, so it might not be suitable for you. Do you want to hear about it anyway?
Yeah, can't do any harm.
OK, so it's a post for a cashier in a cinema in the centre of town. I'm sure you've been to the cinema a few times, so you can guess what kind of role it would be. They're quite short and late shifts, between 5:30 and 10:30 most nights, with slightly longer shifts on Friday and Saturday nights.
Can you tell me what the job involves?
Yes, sure. It says that you'll be required to sell and dispense tickets and provide refreshments. Also, they ask that you be quick on the computers, since you'll also need to take bookings over the phone, but you'll receive basic training for that.
Do they need me to work weekdays as well?
Well, it says here that if you request at least a fortnight in advance, they will grant you a day off on Mondays, but never on a weekend.
I'll think it over and let you know later. Thanks for all your help.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear a flight attendant talking to passengers on an airplane. First, you will have time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all slept soundly overnight. I'm pleased to confirm that our flight is running on schedule and we expect to arrive in Christchurch at 8 a.m. local time. That's about 50 minutes from now. I've been advised by our pilot to warn you that there may be some turbulence on our descent. So please remain seated and have your seatbelt on at all times. As you may have heard, a fairly severe tropical depression is headed for New Zealand and in fact is reaching the west coast of the South Island as we speak. Thankfully, we are landing on the east coast, where the weather is still relatively good. Wind speeds are steady at around 15 miles per hour and the sky is generally overcast, though the sun may creep out from time to time as the morning progresses. That said, when the storm reaches this afternoon, conditions will deteriorate rather quickly. Please exercise extreme caution if you're travelling anywhere on the island today. As I said, the storm has already made landfall on the west-northwest coast, and we're getting reports of high seas and very strong winds of around 75 miles per hour, with gusts up to 110 in Collingwood. Heavy and thundery rainfall is also being reported there. The Southern Alps are experiencing severe blizzard conditions, and there is a virtual whiteout on the roads. There are accumulations of up to 3 foot of snow already, so please, under no circumstances, be tempted to take the mountain road from Christchurch to Bluff. Use the coastal route for the entire journey if you must go down south. Over in the west, in Hokitika and the southwest, in Milford, conditions are bad with heavy rain, high winds and high seas. In fact, several tornadoes were reported in Hokitika and also in Lewis, which is slightly further inland. Also inland, on the northern edge of the Southern Alps, Arthur's Pass should be avoided at all costs. Roads are closed due to the heavy snowfall. Kaikoura has reported wind speeds of 45 miles per hour, with occasional gusts a bit stronger, but so far it has escaped the heavy rain. At present, it is windy and cloudy there.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. We should be landing in approximately 10 minutes' time. Just an update for you on the weather conditions in and around Christchurch. We expect the storm to reach us by approximately 1 p.m. Town officials are closing all roads out of town as conditions are simply going to be too dangerous, with the risk of falling trees and flying debris too high. Roads will have officially been closed for 30 minutes by the time we land at 8 a.m. Passengers whose travel plans did not entail an overnight stay in Christchurch, we would like to extend our apologies to you on behalf of the Christchurch Town Council for the inconvenience caused. However, it is in the interest of safety that these steps have been taken. Those of you without accommodation should go straight to our customer service desk at the airport, where a council official will be waiting to take you to temporary shelters in the town. Those of you who are staying in Christchurch should go to your hotel and follow the instructions of staff there. It may yet be necessary to evacuate you down to the shelters as well. This decision will be made by hotel staff who are monitoring the situation very carefully. The storm has made a direct hit on the island. The storm eye is expected to arrive in Christchurch at about 4 p.m., after which a brief period of calm will be experienced. The western wall of the storm will then hit at approximately 4:30, and the extreme winds and heavy rain should have improved by about 7 p.m. All roads will be reopened from 9 p.m. onwards. However, we're advising people to refrain from driving unless absolutely necessary, as conditions will be extremely hazardous with a risk of flooding everywhere. Flash flooding is a real danger for the valley towns of the south in particular, as mountain rivers and tributaries have already swelled to record levels. High winds have already caused massive power cuts in West Coast towns, and a string of major tornadoes have caused havoc across the Midlands. If at all possible, stay in Christchurch until tomorrow morning, when the clean-up will begin. And, above all, stay safe.
That's the end of section 2. You have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear a conversation between two students and their professor discussing an essay. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
For next week, I'd like you to undertake a piece of research in preparation for writing your final essay. In order to gain top marks, you must include a range of primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. Are there any questions?
Yes, Professor, I have a question. We haven't yet covered how to undertake this sort of research in much depth, and I'm a little unsure of what you want us to do. In telling us to include primary sources, do you mean you want us to design and distribute a questionnaire, analysing the results?
You could design a questionnaire, but you'll soon find that distributing a questionnaire on such a large scale is somewhat troublesome. We couldn't possibly expect you to do it effectively as an individual university student without the necessary resources. No, ideally, I would like you to form 1 or 2 focus groups and interview them. This will provide you with a more qualitative approach. If your strengths lie in mathematics, please by all means take a more quantitative approach, but this will be more strenuous and time-consuming and isn't entirely necessary for the purpose of this study.
Professor, you haven't told us what our project is about. Do we get to choose our own topic based on the previous study?
No, I'm afraid not. This will be a strictly Australian study. However, you can choose which angle you'd like to take, so long as it remains within the realm of anthropology. Does anyone have any questions specifically about the formation of the focus groups? I'd had several emails about this, and I'd like to address it now.
My study is related to growing up in Australia and the question of nature versus nurture. I've gathered more than 200 school children who would be happy to participate in a focus group. Do you think we'll need to include that many participants in a focus group?
Blimey, Douglas, well done for finding that many willing children, but you definitely don't need that many for the study you're going to undertake. I'd say you need no more than 5 children per group, and no more than 3 groups, so 15 children altogether. You definitely need to control the group size in order to generate a meaningful dialogue.
OK, if it's useful, I'll try and do it.
I appreciate your enthusiasm for the project, but there are plenty of different ways to gather data, and I'm sure that if you look hard enough, you'll find someone who has conducted almost the exact same research in the past. My advice for you is don't be too ambitious and try to include as much information about various people or sectors.
For those who haven't ever collected original data before, what do you suggest we do?
I would suggest that you read accounts from other people who have undertaken such research to see what advice they can give. I would also encourage you to read Chapter 8 in the course textbook, which should give you a good introduction to collecting data. Moreover, you should try to practice using the data table provided in your course handbook. By now, you should have read at least 6 or 7 books giving quite detailed instruction on how to go about collecting data.
Professor, I don't know about everyone else, but I'm having trouble reading the books. I had a really big assignment for another course, and I've been spending all my time on that. Jane, have you read all the books the professor mentioned?
Well, my trouble is getting hold of the books. I've been to the library several times, but all the books are out.
Sounds like you should have started borrowing books a bit earlier.
Yes, I should have. But I got several ones from my friend a couple of days ago. I just skimmed through them and don't remember a lot of the information.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
But now let's look at these things. We'll need to start thinking about which ones we'll definitely want to do for the project.
OK, the first one here is the final report.
If you like, we can work together on the research and data collection side of the project and doing the final write-up.
Cool, that sounds good. I'm not sure how much I'd be able to contribute considering I haven't had a chance to read the course material, but I should be able to prepare some sheets and a list of questions that can be used during the focus group sessions.
That sounds appropriate. I think so too.
Do you think we'll need to write a letter to send to the participants, telling them the time and place for the interviews?
Positive. I can take care of that.
Well, that's great.
I should also include a document for them to sign saying that they're happy to be voice recorded.
Oh yes, of course, I forgot about the transcript. That'll likely be a big job, so let's do half each. I'll do one of the groups and you can do the other, OK?
Sounds like a plan.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a talk about what happened at the Fukushima power plant after the March 2011 earthquake. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 36. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 36. To really understand what went on at Fukushima after the tragedy, which was the March the 11th tsunami, I'm going to have to give you a brief introduction to nuclear power and an insight into how a nuclear power plant like Fukushima functions. Look at the diagram here on the screen. To the left there is a rather massive building. This is known as the containment building, and it is, safety-wise, the most fundamental aspect of a nuclear power plant. Containment buildings are typically constructed of steel or reinforced concrete. The Fukushima one was made of a mixture of both. Notice the concrete domed roof, which was so prominent in the aerial photographs which were taken after the tsunami hit. The containment building is, of course, always completely airtight to prevent leakage of radioactive material in the event of a malfunction or failure of plant systems. It should also be natural disaster proof, and Fukushima's was, given the regularity with which they occur in Japan, able to withstand huge magnitude earthquakes. It also withstood the giant tsunami which struck. The containment building itself, therefore, did its job, but more on this later. The containment building houses the reactor core, which is where all the nuclear reactions take place. You will also notice the 4 cooling rods. These rods can be raised and lowered as required to control reaction speed and soak up neutrons. Now, if you look to the right-hand side of the containment building, you'll notice the coolant system, which basically regulates the temperature of the core and prevents it from overheating. You have hot water from the coolant system flowing into the heat exchanger and cold water flowing back into the containment building. This hot water is then transferred through the feed pumps into the turbine hall, where it is harnessed to drive the turbines and generate electricity. But before the energy can be distributed into the national grid, it must be sent through a new conductor. And this is the function of the missing piece of the puzzle. The transformer. The transformer allows electricity to be conducted from the turbines into the national grid. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how nuclear-powered electricity is generated, more or less. Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 37 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 37 to 40. So, what went wrong at Fukushima? Well, let's begin at the beginning. When the earthquake struck, the reactors automatically shut down. Of course, there were 6 reactors at Fukushima, so think of it as 6 plants like the one in the diagram running independently of one another. In actual fact, only 3 of the reactors needed to be shut down, as reactors 4 to 6 were being inspected, so had already ceased to be operational. When the reactors shut down, no more electricity was being produced, so a new source of power was needed to run the cooling systems and prevent the reactor core from overheating. This is where the plant's on-site diesel generators came in. They were immediately powered on, and the reactor core's temperatures were being regulated again. So far, so good. But 50 minutes after the earthquake, the tsunami hit, breaching the plant's 5.7-metre defensive seawall. The tsunami flooded the basements of the 6 turbine halls and disabled the diesel generators. And this is where the problem began. You see, the containment buildings actually did their job, and reactors 1 to 6 were not compromised by the earthquake or the subsequent tsunami. However, site engineers and safety personnel had failed to take into account the possibility of the seawall being compromised. Once this happened, and the turbine halls flooded, the diesel generators were useless. It was going to be a race to get the coolant systems up and running again in time to stop meltdown or fallout from occurring. With the generators down, power was now being supplied by batteries with a life of no more than 8 hours each, the last resort the plant had in an emergency of this nature. Furthermore, inside reactor 1, even some of the batteries had failed. The reactor core was not being cooled sufficiently, and both temperature and pressure inside the containment building were rising. Eventually, a day after the tsunami, there was an explosion in the reactor building and the roof collapsed. Engineers made a desperate attempt to cool the reactor core by pumping salt water into it, but the damage had already been done and the reactor had begun leaking. It was confirmed later that same day that meltdown had occurred. That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.